This is a four-session seminar on, and the title I'm giving it is An Integrated Darshana. I'll be explaining the use of that word in a minute. An Integrated Darshana, God speaks in relation to Meherabade's Discourse literature of the 1920s. And by the way, there was a handout coming in if any of you didn't get one, pick it up. I'm going to be reading through it as a matter of fact, because I think it would be helpful. But last year, this book got published, Creationist Causes. Some of you, we had a program on it last year. And from my standpoint, in the study of Meherabade's philosophy and teachings, a new point has been reached. In this sense, until the book, Baba's own handwritten book, is found, with that big gap still there, I think we have a kind of a complete picture now. There'll be more new material to be published, to be sure. I'm working on some of that myself right now. And it will have certainly a real importance. But I don't think there'll be anything, mind-blowing to the extent that some of this content was. So I do think we have sort of a complete picture. And in the last 20 years, there's been a lot published, particularly from the 1920s. When I first came to Baba in 1970, there was basically nothing available from the 1920s. But now it turns out we have a lot. And Baba was explaining things early on in a form suited to those he was speaking to then, largely Indians, often the Mandalay, also Mir Ashram boys, people like that. And he framed his discourse in a way that was suited to that audience. But in 1931, Baba started traveling to the West. And he really modified the way he expressed himself a lot. And I don't want to be disparaging to the Westerners, but I'll use this just for a second. He really dumbed it down a lot. And that's really not to say that the Westerners were stupid, because they certainly weren't. But in terms of, a developed spiritual understanding, it wasn't there so much. Back in the Middle Ages it had been, but the West had really turned towards other things. So Baba really simplified a lot, you could say, although the messages he gave were nonetheless very beautiful and very deep. There's no doubt about that. But it's almost like he started over with a more global, universalized kind of language, and he built it up from there. You have the discourses, 10 years later, and then God Speaks, which is Baba's metaphysical masterpiece. Most people think so, and I do also. So it became highly developed. But in the process, some of these early themes never got recapitulated. And they're actually quite important. And they fill out the picture in really essential ways, not trivial ways at all, really essential ones. So I feel we're sort of at a period where, for those who are interested in this, we can start to come up with an integrated account of the message that Baba gave to the world. The importance of that really can't be overstated. In a way, I'm just sort of saying the obvious, but to bring it to mind, if you consider the impact that previous avatars had, not just on humanity as a whole, but just more narrowly in the way that civilizations have understood reality. It's a total transformations have been brought about by them. I mean, look at Buddha and the Buddhist vision, or Jesus, and the emphasis on love and suffering and meekness and those things, and Muhammad with the transcendent, glorious oneness of Allah and all these things. And these visions conquered, I won't say the whole world, they weren't destined to become universal, but huge tracts of humanity were immensely transformed. And it's not just, some people would study these things. I'm one of those, as a matter of fact. A lot of you probably are interested, but probably don't regard yourself as textual scholars, I don't suppose. But nonetheless, I do think that for everyone, the vision of reality that the avatar gives becomes kind of the normative frame in which people see things. Even if they don't think of it that way, they in fact do. It's sort of like Allah is transcendent, or God is, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, all this sort of thing would be part of the assumed framework in which we live out our lives. And the avatar does this in the way that no one else does. And as a real student of Meherabade's Darshana, I'm using that word, I think his account is absolutely magnificent. I really don't think there's anything to match it. No disparagement to the great ones of the past. I bow before them, I really do. But he has given an account for the modern world that I think is quite unrivaled. So that's what this is sort of about, an attempt to begin to put some of the pieces together in a larger, more comprehensive picture than we've had before. Of course, this is next 700 years, this is going to go on and on and on. The nice thing about the present time is that this is kind of amateur's hour. In the future, we're going to have St. Augustine and Al-Ghazali and Vivekananda, who are going to blow people like me out of the water. But they're not here yet. Yeah. So the kids can have fun. And so I'd like to also say, have presentations here that I've worked out, but I think it's more natural and better if you guys feel free to bring up questions or points as we proceed. If it's just me talking at a certain point, and you'll start to conduct, as I was saying to someone this morning, your researches into the beyond state. And that's, of course, an admirable kind of research to do. But if you want to sort of come back to one of the other states, to perk up and ask a question. Yeah, I do try to keep anything you bring up as much as you can relevant to what we're talking about. And if it will take us too far to field, I might have to say, well, maybe at lunch we could talk about that, things like that. Okay, everybody ready to go? And you don't have to be a scholar of Baba's books or intellectual genius. To feel that you can talk or. I'd like to try. I'm just a sort of a average kind of intellectual, to tell the truth. There just aren't very many people doing the work I'm doing at the moment. But I would like to try to make it interesting and intelligible to you guys. So if something is confusing, please say so. Don't hesitate about that. So this is the program. I'd like to read it because I think it gives a good description of what I'll be trying to do. 4 sessions. The first is 9:30 to noon, and the second is 2 to 4:30. And tomorrow afternoon, the lunch will be a half hour shorter, and there'll be a musical program. Elaine Munson and I will be singing some songs for about 45 minutes to close the proceedings. So Okay, with the publication of Creationist Causes in August 2022, we have available for our reading and study in published form the complete body of Meherabade's major discourse content from the early Meherabad period in the 1920s, with the exception of the book, whose whereabouts remain unknown. By the way, there is more stuff from the 1920s. There's a lot of Baba's discourses are to be found in Chanji's diaries that haven't been published. Yeah.
What are the assumptions about what happened to the book?
I don't think anybody knows. I don't have any guesses at all. Its whereabouts was last known, as far as I know, in 1959 when Ramju Abdullah got it out of a bank safety deposit box and returned it to Baba. And I think Baba said to Erich once, when he asked, "It's arranged for." So, I don't know.
Thank you.
Despite this one huge hiatus, we can still say that the combination of In God's Hand, I'm going to show these, just some of you will be acquainted with them, but I dare say others among you may not be. Let's see. Yeah. This is In God's Hand. This is Baba's own handwriting. 39 pages that he handwrote probably in 1925. So In God's Hand, Infinite Intelligence in 1926. That's this light volume, sort of light reading for, if you need help getting to the beyond state, it may be an assist. Okay, Tiffin Lectures, that was published in 2017, and these are talks Baba gave to his Mandalay. By the way, these are very readable. Infinite Intelligence is a challenging book, but I think these are quite accessible talks. Kind of the spiritual training of the Mandalay, you could say. And Creationist Causes, and those were talks Baba gave to boys, the Meherashram boys. But they're astonishingly deep. They're quite readable, and the prose is quite accessible, I would say, but the idea content is quite astonishing. And provides us with a comprehensive of what we could call the Avatar's early Meherabad dispensation. By the way, these books are quite different from each other. It's not Baba doesn't repeat himself from one book to the other. Really, not at all. There's quite a range we get. How does this extraordinary body of content integrate with Meher Baba's classic philosophy and teachings of later decades? In particular, what is the relation between this early material and God Speaks, with which most of you are, here's my much battered copy, published in 1955. Widely held to be Meher Baba's metaphysical masterpiece. Okay, now here are some themes that I think are common from beginning to end. Certain fundamental themes characteristic of Meher Baba's message to the modern world are common to all of his discourse, from the earliest to the latest. His metaphysics is the study of what exists, what is real. Every worldview has explicitly or implicitly a concept of what are the prime realities. That's metaphysics. Could be summarized in the four-word sentence, God alone is real. So if anybody ever asks you, what are Meher Baba's metaphysics? Actually, you could give it in 4 words, God alone is real. God is everything, and the created world is the manifestation of the nothing. By the way, this will be our topic this afternoon. The path to the realization of this great truth is accomplished through the long journey of the soul. Meher Baba gave to this narrative the name, the divine theme. Most of you have heard of the divine theme. And by the way, there is a little book of Baba's Do you have it here at the bookstore?
It's here.
It's here. It's a lovely, this is a facsimile reprint of the original 1944, about 43, I think, Baba had it published. That's his name that he gave in the 1940s to the journey of the soul. It represents his greatest, one of his greatest contributions to humanity's understanding of spiritual truth. As best I know, Meherabode is the first man ever to have explained this. The whole journey of the soul from the beginning to the end. Okay, where did I go? Okay. Another central teaching concerns the causes of human bondage in sanskaras and karma. Now, the idea of karma, of course, has been well developed in Hinduism and Buddhism. And sanskaras, that word has been there, but I think Baba explained and developed on the topic of sanskaras more than has been done before. I haven't seen anything else really that approaches his treatments of it. I may be wrong, and if somebody knows me wrong, I'd like to be corrected on that, or anything else. And it is this that ties us to the cycle of reincarnation. Our escape from this enslavement lies in the path to God and the ascent through the planes of higher consciousness. There are several great paths or yogas, yet the most important of these is the path of love. And the highest manifestation of such love lies in the relation between the seeker and the master, the lover and the beloved, who presents himself to our eyes as the perfect master and avatar. That's how Baba characterized himself. Muhammad represented himself as the Rasul, means the messenger or the prophet. Jesus is understood through the Greek word Christ. Buddha means the enlightened or the awakened one. But the term that Baba used is avatar. It's actually an old Hindu term, although Baba clarified its meaning a great deal.
Is it one of the perfect master actually gave him that?
What's that?
Was it Sai Baba or Upasni that gave him the word? Or at least declared to the humanity that he's the avatar?
Upasni did say
Yeah.
that Baba was the avatar.
Yeah.
And this is a word like Krishna in Vaishnava tradition is regarded as the avatar. Ram is also. So it is a word within, especially Vaishnava, which means the river of religion within the Hindu world, focused on Vishnu as the supreme deity who incarnates as the avatar. So Baba took that term, although he really did clarify it a great deal, like in his discourse on the avatar, which many of you would know. And God Speaks also gives a treatment of the topic, and in many other places. Okay, so this is what is kind of character. Although Baba didn't talk about the avatar in the 1920s, he was calling himself a perfect master. But basically, this was these are themes common to Meherabade's explanations from beginning to end. This really didn't change. All of these foundational themes feature in Meherabade's discoursing throughout the nearly 5 decades of his avatar career. Yet his discourse in the 1920s brings into view perspectives that may seem strange and unfamiliar to close students of God Speaks and Discourses. One such theme is the dichotomy of thinking and the imagination. The scope and significance of the imagination, as explained in Infinite Intelligence, could never have been guessed at from Meherabade's later writings. And if you haven't read Infinite Intelligence or been clobbered over the head with it in talks by people like me, I can tell you, you really won't know what those words mean. Baba uses these 2 words in a very radical way, and they're very deep, deep ideas. he used these English words. He could have used Sanskrit words or Arabic words, but nope, thinking and imagination. So this afternoon we'll go into this a bit. This afternoon is on Meherabad's metaphysics or ontology. Ontology is another word for the study of what exists, what is real. The scope, in God's hand provides us with what we could call an illuminationist philosophy. There's a tradition within Islam, Sufism, called the Ishraqi tradition. And what that is illuminationism that conceives the most fundamental philosophical, metaphysical terms are light and darkness. And according to this view, those are the most primitive archetypes within the human consciousness. And so they developed a whole way of understanding things that way. And there's a lot of this in Baba's teaching also. Throughout this early literature, we are introduced to another major dichotomy, pran and akash, energy and space. Those of you who were at these things last year would have been exposed. Had any of you read Creation and Its Causes? Any of you here? Okay, just not many. Well, this is the master treatment on pran and akash, which turns out to be really important. You would never know it from God Speaks, but it really is an important part of Baba's Darshana. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. They play an enormous role in the creation and constitution of the imaginary world that we see around us. Creation and its causes also gives us a developed account of the asmans. Let's see. I have to go to the next page. Yeah. Or skies, which function as a kind of adjunct to the 7 planes of consciousness and embroil many spiritual seekers and adepts in their visionary and fantastic inner domains. So from God Speaks and Discourses, those who have studied those books, we learn about the planes of consciousness, right? The 7 planes of consciousness and the subtle and the mental worlds. Well, it turns out there's a lot more to it than that. There are these kind of adjuncts to the planes, the asmans or skies. And Baba describes them, and he gives their Persian names, as a matter of fact, and says a bit of what you find there. He told this to the Meherabode boys. He had never told it to the Mandalay. He never put it in God Speaks, but their qualifiedness for such discourse was proven by the fact that within 2 weeks, a bunch of them had gone up into those realms and were experiencing it themselves. Okay, so that's going to be this afternoon and tomorrow.
It seemed like an interesting case of foreshadowing.
Yeah, I know. It's really amazing. But Baba appears to have dropped the subject after that. You know, you won't find it in his later books, but now this all comes to light.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Through all the years of work that you've done, so with lots of dedication to this work, and of course the Infinite Intelligence book has been later on creation and its causes and so forth. Have you come up to any conclusion or perhaps understanding that why Baba revealed or talked about Pranakash and the birth of it and then the creation of and then the universe, and thinking the imagination much earlier than God Speaks in 1950 and so with the divine theme. So before this come up, we all thought, oh, divine theme, that's the core of Meherabad's Darshana. But do you have any idea why?
Let's come back to that this afternoon.
Okay.
because we'll be talking about thinking the imagination and prana and akash then. But it is very striking to me that Baba, those are, I think, very fundamental to Meherabad's Darshana. This afternoon will actually be the key exposition on that topic. But I do think that without that, the picture of Baba's philosophy and teachings is very incomplete. And it's very striking that he explained it and then dropped it. It just remained in these old manuscripts. There's stories of Mahayana Buddhism, some of the Mahayana Buddhist sutras, which, got written out 600, 700, 800 years after the death of the Buddha. But one version is that they got stowed by the Buddha in the Tushita heaven, or another version in the realm of the Nagas. This is sort of a hell where the snakes are. And then some of the great Mahayana sages like Nagarjuna found them there and revealed them, right? Hidden away for 600, 700 years. It's almost a bit like that. These things were buried in these manuscripts for 100 years, and then they come out. And they turn out to be really important, at least in my opinion.
No snakes were required in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've had, Glenn?
I think maybe Baba just planted the seeds or the seed in the consciousness of these young boys. So later they're going to be reborn and they're ready with the seed.
Yeah, I think that's
what I would
probably
like
true.
to think that.
If you suddenly see some extraordinarily precocious hotshots on these topics, you could say, you cheated. You heard the original lectures. Yeah.
Or this is kind of an off-the-wall thought, but
Yeah.
it really strikes me that the divine theme-based view of Meherabad's teachings is essentially what you could call orthodoxy. And you're kind of introducing what at the moment seems like a heterodoxy, or it's like that's the Catholic, but then here's the Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, just as a comparison.
And I, unfortunately, in a 4-session treatment, I can't cover the divine theme. We've had a 6th session like we'll have in Myrtle Beach, we had in Tucson. I make the divine theme one of the basic presentations. And the one who is really to blame for that is Meherabad, because he really did feature it as his main philosophical teaching.
Yeah, and he gave it as a form of meditation too.
Yeah, he did. A meditation. He was going to have a movie on it. God Speaks is built on it. So he kind of put it up front. But it turns out there's a lot more. At least you guys can, of course, disagree, and say, no, this early stuff is really quite unimportant. You're just all fixated on it because you've been working on it for so long.
Morn, also, Baba had a lot of emphasis on importance of God Speaks, and he clearly asked people, some of the visitors or even mandalis, to go and read it. Even he asked Mera to go and read God Speaks. So I wonder, perhaps that's what we needed at the time.
I do feel that God Speaks kind of establishes the basic framework that should be used. It's, so nothing that I say should in any way be construed as undercutting or undervaluing God Speaks. I love it. I'm an absolute devotee of it. But I do think, that last chapter, Baba, when I first read it in 1970 or 71, where Baba said there is much, despite all that's been explained here, there are many other explanations and many other questions. And at the time, I said, this is it. But actually, he was telling the truth. There is a lot more.
Yeah, Ward, if you'll excuse the thought, my notion is that you could put a little footnote on that, and appending to that footnote will be the entirety of all the books that you've translated, that you've rendered.
Edited from the 1920s, yeah. If you doubt Meherabad on this, please read Infinite Intelligence and come back 3 years later if you've ever finished it. It's a difficult book. but creation
That's
causes.
such a pregnant statement. Much more could be said, and essentially will be said.
Right. It turns out that it had been said.
Yes.
He just didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Well, the Mandali would have known, but the others wouldn't. But as this is actually, we're not going to get to a lot of this until this afternoon, but as a very first subject preliminary to all of this, I would like to begin with the topic of Meherabad's words. On the first session and every presentation I'm giving this year deals with this because I do think it's really important. In the community of Meherabad's lovers, we have arrived at the stage where we need to ask which books, which compilations of Meherabad's words should we regard as authentic. I would like to submit some standards which ought to be applied when claims are made in this connection. In particular, no text claiming to present Meherabad's words ought to be accepted as authentic if its sources are not specified. I don't know, some people might be made angry by this, but I really am going to say that this really should be an essential standard. Authentic editions of Meherabad's words need to be offered to the public in the form of critical editions. And I'll be explaining presently what that is. I wish there was a nicer phrase for it than critical editions, but that is the term that is used in textual scholarship. And we absolutely have to have them at this point. The standards applicable to this are matters of concern to all Baba lovers and ought to be transparently put forth to one and all. So, these then are the general topics. The first this morning, on Meherabad's words and their relation to the great world spiritual traditions. I doubt we'll get to all of these topics, but I'll read them anyway. On Meherabad's words, what standards apply in determining authenticity in assessing what purports to be a text of Meherabad's words? I mean, you'll read a discourse Meherabad gave, and you read it, and good, but why should I believe Baba said that? Like, where did this come from? Is it someone's diary? Did somebody have a tape recorder? And if it's someone's diary, okay, good. Whose diary? Was he there? Did he write notes at the time? Or like Bailey, who lost his diaries, did he write them down 40 years later? And how good a memory did this guy have? How good was he at understanding what Baba said? Some people are much better than all these questions. And right now we're getting flooded with stuff and we're not being told where it's from. Don't want to criticize anybody for this, but the time has really come where there needs to be, critical editions done of all of this, in my opinion. And it's like probably most people themselves won't want to do this work. It's like any work, it's overwhelmingly comprised of menial and boring tasks. Although to me, all of them are most interesting. When you really get into something, the boring things become interesting. But to most people, they would seem utterly trivial and boring. So most people won't do this. But I do think, and in talking to Baba lovers, around the world, even though most Baba lovers aren't going to do it themselves, many people do care that it be done well. It's like, let's suppose you really care about some line of business, or let's say the LA Center, Meherabode, and I won't use that, but you have business you really care about, and okay, I really want to be sure that it's being managed honestly, and there isn't corruption happening, and so forth and so on. So somebody does an audit, right? Well, you're probably not going to do read the audit yourself, 120 pages of facts and figures. How many people will do that? Almost no one. But a lot of people would care that it's done well, right? Isn't that true? Mm-hmm. Or if it's not an audit, you know the sort of thing I mean. So, in this sense, I think a lot of Baba lovers do care. Is this really authentic?
Yeah.
I may
It's like
not
we're
have the,
listing the ingredients on what we eat.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh well, that's 90% what's said there, but there's 10% that may be something else.
yeah, that's right. And like maybe a lot of people, I never read the ingredients on what I eat, but I would certainly prefer that there not be a big dose of cyanide in there, you know. So,
Ward,
yeah.
it would be a good idea that for any published book, and I know you're the head of editorial committee, trust overlooking of, all that, and I think anybody who wants to publish a book, they need to get a permission because all the copyrights are with A&B PPCT. Wouldn't it be a good idea that in this published book, also portions of original Meher Baba's manuscript, even though that it's his own handwriting, it might not be that clear and so forth. I'm sure there's some enhancement can be done, but wouldn't it be a good idea to publish that beside
Okay, we're
the
gonna get into that.
editorial
We'll be
comments?
getting into that in just a minute, that
Okay.
whole question. That is very important. The sources, I'll put it this way, the sources should be available, publicly available.
Yeah.
It's usually not practical to print it in the book itself. I mean, this is already, Creation's Cause is already $75. And if the sources were published, it would be $225, right? And no one would read the sources anyway. But they do need to be made available, and that is part of trust policy on this. So, but then I probably won't have the time to get to this, but in other, Mehrana and other longer presentations, Beads on a String, Meher Baba's Darshana in the world's great spiritual traditions. So Meher Baba, Vedanta, and the Vaishnava tradition. Vaishnava is the root where there is Vishnu, worshippers of Vishnu. That's where the idea of avatar is developed, actually. Primordial metaphysics from the idea of the avatar. Meher Baba and Sufism, illuminations on the spiritual path. I'm no, scholar of Sufism, although I've tried to read what I could. But it strikes me that one of the places where Sufism could really enrich the understanding of Baba lovers is on matters of the spiritual path, not describing the planes, but what is entailed on journeying spiritually. There's some magnificent treatises. We're probably not at a point where many people would be interested yet, but I think the day will come. Meher Baba and Mystical Christianity, Christ, Love, and the Role of Suffering. Meher Baba and Buddhism, the Critique of the False Self. This was Buddha's particular focus on showing how what we consider this to be the self is altogether false and does not exist. And I think there's a lot to be gained from that. And the New Humanity and Integrated Darshana for the upcoming age. Okay, so I'm just going to read what's coming up this later sessions so that you have an idea. This afternoon, Meher Baba's Metaphysics, the Everything and the Nothing, and Thinking the Imagination. I feel in this whole enterprise of this 4 sessions, the really big thing that has to happen is an integration of those 2 ideas, the everything and the nothing, and thinking the imagination. So we'll go over some of those big ideas. Metaphysics, and again, ontology is the other word used in philosophy departments. Ontology, the Greek word entos, means what exists, what is real, what actually exists. And Meher Baba certainly has an ontology. Thinking the imagination and the role of imagination in Meher Baba's Darshana. Prana and Akash as the primordial dichotomy within the imagination. And then last, Meher Baba's 2 creation narratives. He actually gave forth 2 of them. People know the whim, the who am I narrative. but the other is the Prana Nakash creation narrative. So I'd like to review those, and I think they fit together quite beautifully, actually. Okay, and then tomorrow morning, cosmic architecture, the divine foundations of the cosmic order. And then we're going to go over 3 trinities in Meherabad's teaching, or his darshana. One is knowledge, power, and bliss, and its cosmological consequences. And as best I know, this trinity, knowledge, power, bliss, originates with Meherabad. I have not been able to find it that individually. All philosophical and religious traditions would look at those, knowledge and power. But as a trinity representing the nature of God, I haven't found that anywhere.
Lord, you must know that Satchidananda is a very common term.
Yes, we'll get to that, but Satchidanand does not mean knowledge, power, and bliss. Sat means existence, Chit means consciousness, and Anand means bliss.
Yes.
There's no power term.
But I believe that Meherabad gave that as a way of translating Satchidananda.
Okay, we'll have to get to that this afternoon, yeah. But let's put it this
You
way.
need to give a source.
In the long, long history
There are lots
of Hinduism, those people would never have understood that to mean knowledge, power, bliss. Now, Meher Baba glossed it that way, but that is not how Hinduism has understood it.
Yes, but I think we're talking about English here. We're not talking about, in other words, he chose those English words, but I guess the question is whether essentially he meant Sat, Chit, Anand, and I suspect he did, but we'll see.
Okay, we'll get to that this afternoon, tomorrow, and
Sure.
I think not.
Okay.
I think he definitely did not mean those 3 ideas.
All right.
So we can duke it out.
Yeah.
How about trial by combat?
Arm wrestling.
Arm wrestling. Okay. Yeah. Okay. God as the triune actor, creator, preserver, and destroyer. Baba, in Infinite Intelligence, uses the word Ishwar to designate this. In Hinduism, this idea is standard. Dattatreya is one of the deities who represent Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Okay, here's a third trinity. The 3 states, wakefulness, dream, and sound sleep. Of course, we are all acquainted with these. At least I hope you guys all had acquaintance with the last of these last night, so you don't have to try it out in our talks today. But they're not just psychological states, they're cosmological principles for Meherabad. This is really very close to Vedanta, where all of that's there. And then the self and the other, the microcosm and the macrocosm. Okay, this is a huge topic in Meherabad. We'll get to it tomorrow. And then the last one, the path to God. The 3 great margs or paths. Marg means path. And the 3 great paths are Gyan, Karma, and Bhakti. That is to say, the path of knowledge, the path of action, and the path of devotion. This is a standard idea. The Bhagavad Gita is the master treatise on this topic. And Baba fully embraced this idea. And he also explained what its metaphysical foundation was in Knowledge, Power, Bliss, as a matter of fact. The involutionary path, the planes and the asmans. So we'll go over that a little bit. And if any of you have, visited these places yourself, you can chime in, and say, no, the 3rd asman is not like that. Of course, if you're in the 3rd asman, one of the dangers there is that there's a hiatus, a state of enchantment, where whatever position you're in, you freeze, and you can remain there for the rest of your life. So it could be that if you boastfully try to correct misapprehensions on the 3rd asman, you might suddenly freeze up, and that'll be it for the rest of your life. That happens, Baba said. Okay, the preeminence of love and the role of the master. That will be 1:30 to 3:30, and then for the last thing, Elaine Munson, Elaine is here, right, will be singing some songs to round it out. So that's the picture, okay? And here I want to say something about, I always like this quote, and I've been using this one a lot. This is by Al-Ghazali, one of the giants of Islamic thought, a very great Sufi. I doubt he was the perfect master, but he strikes me as an advanced soul. But the farthest limit achieved by human reason through the principles of the illumination of his sublimity is bewilderment. So in other words, trying to understand God. The farthest limit is bewilderment.
So if we're really confused, we're really getting somewhere.
That's right. That's right. If you're totally bewildered, you get an A+ from Al-Ghazali. Yeah. And I'm using now this word darshana. And it was after long meditation on this that I sort of started using this word, because the word philosophy is wretched applied to Meherabades. You know, philosophy might have been a suitable word back when the time of Plato or someone like that. It means philos, wisdom, and love. Phileo is to love, and sophos or sophia means wisdom, the love of wisdom. Okay, that's nice, but it hasn't meant that for a long time. It's really become the intellectual study of, I suppose, truth. Nowadays, a lot of philosophers reject the idea of truth, but and God is kind of excluded from the picture, and it's purely intellectual. It doesn't admit other sources like the revelation of a God-realized person. And it tends to see something is building on the last, previous philosophy and advances in philosophy. And and the sort of thing they study in philosophy departments. Well, that's not what Baba is doing at all. Nothing like that. And also, it seems like Baba didn't like the word. I've seen a number of cases where Baba really seems to have shown a distaste for the word philosophy.
He criticized it actually.
Yeah, and it implies that he was just kind of a thinker who was taking some of this and some of that and coming up with his own theories. No, he was the avatar of the age. He was one with the truth, actually was one with God, and from that divine gnosis was giving explanations suited to this time and age that we're in. The truth with a capital T can never be understood. As long as you're still there, you can't understand the truth. The mind has to be annihilated, and you have to become one with the truth. That being the case, God-realized masters, Meherabode and Muhammad and the perfect masters, give an understanding that is most useful and best suited to the people he's talking to as a means for them to begin to approach God. It's sort of, so no understanding can ever really be the truth. It's an approach to the truth. So this is the idea of revelation. It's a revelation. And whatever is revealed is itself a limited expression too. Also, another thing about what Meherabade is giving us is that he wasn't concerned primarily with the correctness of our understanding. What he really wanted to give was a vision or a framework suitable for us, approaching God and becoming one with God. Doing it ourselves is the point of it all. Following, and particularly, the path of love. And like the word philosophy just doesn't convey this at all. Some other words I was thinking is cosmology. I would say Meherabade has the philosophy. That would be one little subset. He has a cosmology too. But what cosmology points to is the cosmos, right? Well, how about God? God is beyond the cosmos. So it's not a satisfactory word. Metaphysics and ontology, well, those are very unfriendly words to most people. And also, they're just concerned with one topic of what ultimately exists. But Baba's account is much more than that. It's about, how to obey a master and what the path of love is like and ethics, every kind of topic, not just that limited set of things. Explanations, sometimes people say, well, you should say Baba's explanations. Well, Baba explained all kinds of things, like how to find a must, or how you should conduct yourself at this darshan program, or, all kinds of things. Or, so the word I'm opting for is darshana, and it already means this. This isn't a meaning I'm giving to it. There are two fundamental, darshana and darshan are the same word in the Indian language. There's no difference at all. But I'm using it as an English word because we hear the difference in English, darshan and darshana. But what the two meanings of darshan and darshana are this. First, having the sight, the root is sight, to see, having the sight of a master, or having the sight of a deity, like you'd have the darshan of God or the darshan of Ganesh, say, for someone who was devoted to Ganesh, or the sight of a great figure, I had the darshan of Mahatma Gandhi. It would be used in India that way. And by extension, it gets applied to the tombs or samadhis of people like this. So we have this meaning in our Baba culture. Oh, I had Baba's darshan in 1962, or I took Baba's darshan at the samadhi this morning. Okay, that's one standard meaning that most of the Baba world would be familiar with. But there is another meaning, and that is a philosophical system in the greater sense that I mean. For example, have you heard of Vedanta, many of you? Vedanta. There are supposedly 6 orthodox or astika darshanas in early Hinduism, and that's so Vedanta is one. Or yoga, Patanjali yoga, or Samkhya, or Mamamsa, Vishesheka Nyaya. There are 6 of them, and then there are unorthodox, like Buddhism or Jainism. So the word is already used this way to mean both an understanding, a framework of understanding that is rooted not just in intellectualism, but in the gnosis of masters, and that entails a spiritual path too. I think that's much better for Baba. So I hope that will be, you'll understand what I mean and won't find it objectionable if I talk about Meherabad's darshana instead of his philosophy. Yeah.
I just don't want us to be saying Meherism or Babaism. So I'll take darshan.
You'll take darshana.
Yes.
Ward, I have a question. Well, of course, I was thinking about word teaching, but his main saying is I've come not to teach but to awaken. So actually, Nashwan published that book, Meherabad's teaching, and he got some criticism because of that title.
Yeah.
So maybe we can't use teaching. But is there any English equivalent to Sanskrit?
Well, that's what I was going through a few of them. Another word is theosophy.
Yeah, no.
Do we really want to say Meherabad's theosophy?
No.
And then let's invite Madame Blavatsky to explain it to us. Or
theology.
there really isn't a good word.
No.
So I think, and teaching, but Meherabad's sort of, I've come not to teach but to awaken, We could talk about Meherabad's philosophy or Meherabad's teachings in certain limited ways, but I think we need a more adequate and comprehensive word. So I'm trying out this word darshana, I think it's a really good word because it implies the word darsh in Sanskrit means seeing. It's a seeing.
In a sense, it's like his outlook.
His outlook, yeah. And it's good because to get the real thing, an outlook, even if I'm a sixth planar and my seeing is a direct seeing of God, well, I'm still not one with God. The goal is to become one with God. Okay, so no darshana will be the real thing, but it has a, an outlook, an approach,
Or an overview.
and it's not alien to the idea of this is revealed by one who knows.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. Baba, I mean,
Applies vision also.
yeah, vision is there, yeah. And actually, I do think that even to dummies like me, and maybe some of you here would feel that, when I really delve into Baba's books and teachings and so forth, it's more than just understanding that I get. There's like a glimpse of something, or a feeling for it, or a whole window is thrown open on reality. So just that it's not just intellectual, it's more than that. So the word darshana to me is good for that.
I so sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's a great word because thinking about Baba's darshans and
Right.
I grew up with that. Baba gave all these darshans means being within.
Yeah,
So it brings the master in.
that connotation is there. Through his darshana, maybe we can have his darshan.
Yes.
And as I say in the Indian languages, it's the same word, darshan and darshana, but we're borrowing into English. And in English, they sound different. So there's no reason not to use that difference, his darshana, as his revealed explanation of God, creation, the path, and everything else given to the world. So
Well, as long as we know what darshana means and just don't repeat it like a bird or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Not until now, quite honestly, I didn't know what darshana mean. Oftentimes I've used
Yeah.
it. But it makes sense that to use this to stand out because he is different.
Yeah, and I've said this, but I want to emphasize, this isn't a meaning that I came up with. This is a meaning that the word already has. It's just the standard word for a system of philosophical, a philosophy again. But Vedanta is so much more than a philosophy. But they call it a darshana. That's the word that is used.
They use it in Vedanta?
In
Darshana
India,
they
yeah,
use
no,
it.
this is a darshana, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I mean, in India, this is the standard word for things like that. I was looking at like Islamic words like hikmah or something, but hikmah isn't right. Or,
Not that
It's
long.
a good, it's a nice vegetable.
yeah, that's true.
How did you come up with
Yeah,
In California, we have a vegetable called jicama.
that?
Jicama.
Bring it up next time.
Yeah,
So
It's a root. It's yeah.
what you say makes sense. So if one is talking to somebody who knows nothing about Meherabode, and you say Meherabade's darshana, is there something you could put in parentheses that kind of explains it?
well, in talking to people who don't know about Meherabad, I'd probably say his philosophy and teachings. That wretched phrase. Unless the conversation had reached a level of depth where I could explain it. I mean, I wouldn't, try to inflict this on people who don't have any background or understanding. But I'm inflicting it on you guys.
Yeah, but we've inflict darshan and duni and
Yeah.
amartithi on the uninitiated also.
Okay, well, maybe so.
So
maybe
I don't think that that's a bad thing to do because
Sure.
you're bringing people into this world. I'm just thinking sometimes you need to give them a little context. But we can discuss that later.
Well, if it was a suitable conversation, I might say, Meherabada's, I like to use the word his darshana, which is his philosophy and teachings. Ramju Abdullah used that in the title of his 1933 book. So,
Oh, he did use
Wow.
that?
Sri Meherabad, his philosophy and teachings.
Oh.
But the thing is, in 1933, they were still under the British Raj, and they had to accommodate to the English language as it was. So he wasn't going to, he would.
Yeah.
That was kind of the best that was available.
Yeah.
That's the best I can think of, and the best is pretty lousy, to tell the truth. But,
Maybe we don't have to talk about this word massively.
Yeah.
Instead, if there are newcomers, offer Baba's books and his
Yeah.
basic
yeah.
revelation.
No, but it's a good question how to. But anyway, I'm bringing this up with all the different groups.
I think teachings is good for everybody. I think it's universal in this side.
What's that?
Teachings.
Teachings. That's teaching.
I think teachings is more accepted because it's more like you relate. Everybody relates to that. no matter what your background is. And it's like a gateway.
Would you prefer teachings to darshana?
Personally, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe some people will. I mean, this is just my own
It's
take
teaching.
on it.
Like
Yeah.
teachings is like educating yourself and then get into the gateway before you actually get a relationship.
Yeah,
And then you get his darshan, which is a stream blessing.
yeah.
The word teachings, though, Baba specifically said, and it's pretty well known, I come not to teach, but to awaken.
Yeah, I know. That's a big,
But it could be considered a paradox. That's his primary teaching.
right. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Anyway, this is a conversation we can have in the Baba world. If people wind up liking this word, they'll accept it. If they don't, they won't. So, yeah. Erin, did you want to say?
Yeah, I'm very new to this.
Yeah.
And when I went to India, I love that word, going to the tomb, you know, and the darshan. It's a beautiful word.
It is.
And when you say it, words have vibration.
Yeah.
And I think the darshan, for me, vibrates the heart.
Yeah.
And so, not his teachings, but as you say, his darshan is his vision,
Yeah.
is his love coming through
Yeah.
in words. Not
Yeah.
to teach, but to feel. And that's kind of why I'm here
Right.
today, through your vibration and your knowing you, how you express this
Yeah.
from the heart. So I love that word. And
Yeah, I feel it has that too. Like you're going to talk about love for God. Would you use philosophy for that? It's sort of, but darshana
Philosophy is
can
out.
encompass that.
Yeah.
Meherabad's darshana is all. I could say Meherabad's darshana, if you boil it down to its essence, is all about love. Okay,
Yeah.
there's no contradiction in that at all. You know, so I think it's a very good word. To tell the truth.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
Before you go on, a while ago, you and I had a conversation about the Baba culture, the culture of Baba lovers,
Yeah.
which is evolving in very early stages. So I think these kinds of discussions about the importance of the kinds of words we use really matter.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we're having that discussion. Anyway,
Yeah, I feel we're at that point now, actually. And so that'll, what I'm coming into right now, let me switch over to Baba's
Have you
words.
read it somewhere in a formal publication and used this word? Like I know in Infinite Intelligence or Tiffin. Have you used this word?
I haven't in any of these books because these are editions and I'm reluctant to,
Yeah,
try
I see
an
what you're
innovation in
Yeah.
a book like that. But in some of the articles I've written in the Glow, I've used it.
Yeah.
I'm using it more and more.
Mhm.
I hope the Baba world will like it. And if the Baba world doesn't, okay, but then what do you suggest? Do you really want to have philosophy again? Or teachings is a little better, I guess. Anyway.
Well, here we have lectures too.
Lectures, right. Meherabad's lectures. When Meherabad lectures us, that's great, huh? I know, they did use the word lectures in the 19... The thing is, they were under the British Raj, and they were kind of wanting to make Baba sound respectable, in terms of the...
I mean, the word lecture itself essentially means a spoken word, I suppose.
It's actually reading. Lectus, etymologically means reading. Yeah.
What is the real love for Baba?
What is the real love for Baba?
For Baba. What kind is real love for Baba? The word? What would the word be? Is that what you said?
Or what is the real thing? As to what love for Baba is, I wish I knew.
you know.
You probably know better than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Baba used the word love. Some people say the word love has been so debased, by our modern culture, but Baba used it anyway. And
But he explains the difference.
yeah,
How the word is misused.
what real love for God
He does
is.
say the word is misused.
Okay, coming to the topic of Meherabad's words now. This is we're at a stage where I think this topic it would be really desirable in the Baba world to for there to a lot of people who are aware of some of the questions and issues that arise. You know, I always think, let's suppose, okay, go back, if you can possibly imagine this, to a time where there were no cell phones. And this will be too much for Hollywood people to bear, but no videos, no film, and some really interesting person is coming to the LA area, right? And you would absolutely love to meet this person, but you can't. Okay. So Margaret goes and she comes back. What are some of the questions you might ask? You might say, what did he look like? It's natural, right? And what did he do? Right? And what did he say? Those seem to me to be very primal questions. Okay, what did he look like? Pictures of Jesus on the cross. Pictures of Ram, Krishna. They didn't do Muhammad, he was excluded. Or those magnificent statues of Baba. See, this dimension of interest in the Baba, in the avatar, the physical image and likeness. Huge thing, right? Okay, what did he do? Well, you got the Ramayana, which tells the story of the life of Ram, or the Mahabharata, you know, and the Battle of Kurukshetra, or the Gospels are basically stories of what Jesus did in large part. In Muhammad, they wrote down his life after 100 and 150 years. But this is a huge aspect of our awareness of these avatars, right? And what did he say? Well, the Gospels, the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist Sutras, the Quran, that was Allah, but it came through Muhammad. These are primordial ways of getting to know any individual, and in particular, the avatar of the age. And there's no way that Baba's words cannot exercise incalculable impact on humanity. It is bound to happen. Like, let's suppose somebody comes and says, I'm new to Baba, and Baba says, you know, obedience is important. I accept him as my master. I would like to obey him. What should I do? And go to Payam, and Payam says, well, this and that and the other thing. And I said, why should I believe you? Mm-hmm. Right? And what do you say? I mean, say, okay, well, I don't know. You asked me. I said the best I could. So, well, what should I do? Well, read Baba's words yourself, right? Wouldn't you say that? Yeah. You know, where else would you direct people, right? And that will always, in the previous years, the Mandalay were still alive, and they carried a lot of clout, and people would go to Mani or Erich or whoever and say, what should I do? I'm a mess. And they would say something and it would help. And many Baba lovers, most Baba lovers, had deep respect for them and would tend to buy it, right? But who is there now? I mean, maybe there are souls of that stature. There probably are. But who are they exactly? I mean, because the LA group, you want to publish a list? Do you have a list of perfect masters here in the group? You know?
Dr. Gurcha does.
Huh?
Dr. Gurcha.
Yeah, so inevitably, people are going to go more and more and more and more to Baba's words, right? I don't see how it cannot happen. It's bound, and we're at the period where it's going to happen more and more and more because the authority figures have all died. I'm not saying that there aren't authoritative people. There very well may be, but do we know who they are? You know, we don't have anyone. So inevitably, probably even saints and masters will be quoting Baba's words too. Look, I mean, Rumi did it. Ibn Arabi did it. They went back to the Quran, you know. People would go back to the Gita, you know, even perfect masters would. We're in the time where this is going to come more and more to the fore. And so the question that I'm raising is, how do we know that what is given to us as Meher Baba's words are real, are authentic? I'll give one. I don't want to be I really don't want to be criticizing the work that anybody has done. I really don't. But I'll just give you one little example. Again, no criticism, but there was I was working on the Tiffin Lectures, those talks Baba gave, and was going through Lord Meher to see what might be there. And I found a 3 or 4 line passage, indented quote, Meherabode said, and it was given as a quote. And I happened to know that was a 3 or 4 line synopsis of 3 pages of a Tiffin lecture. And I don't think there was any bad intention. They probably just didn't, know how to do this properly. And it was a accurate synopsis of it. It's true. But it's not like those are Meherabade's words at all. And it's not as though the Tiffin Lectures are, strictly speaking, Meherabade's words also. They're a record by Chamji of them. So this is all over the place now. And all sorts of things are going to be quoted as Baba said this and Baba said that. And a lot of times it's very dubious. Again, I don't generally want to impugn anybody's intentions at all, or even the work they've done. It's just people haven't been thinking about it in these terms until now. But this being my line of work, I do think about it in these terms. So that's what the topic is right here. What should actually be done to establish reliable editions of Baba's words as best we can?
Ward, one question. Oftentimes, when we talk, when you come across some people and you talk to them, there's always this thing that Quran, how do we know the Quran is not a real source there? It's been rewritten by some people. We don't know if we have the actual copy of what Muhammad dictated and so forth, the Rasul. Same for the scriptures on Christ and I don't know about Buddha and so forth. But if that question comes up, like you're bringing it up, how do you know if he was a silent master? He was a silent master for 45 years. And then all these books are printed after him. How do you know these are his real words?
Well, yeah, that's exactly the question that I'm raising and we'll be getting to. And interestingly enough, the Gospels appear, there are 4 Gospels and 3 are called the Synoptic Gospels. They're related to each other and they may have had some kind of a common written source, at least they call it Q. That's a speculation. And they appear to originate around 70 AD, 60 to 70, probably 70. And Jesus was crucified, 33 AD, or subtract 3 years, they got the date line off. So about 40 years after the crucifixion of Christ. Okay, taking from Meherabode, that would be about 2010. We're about that far, 10 years out. And the Gospel of John was apparently composed probably between 90 and 110 AD, so 60 to 80 years after that.
Isn't that around when Lord Meher came out?
Yeah. Well, those are in the 1980s it began to come out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was when it first came out. And the Quran was actually compiled earlier. They formed basically a Quran committee and it was under the Mandali of the time. I think under the Caliphate of Omar it started, who was the second caliph, who was a giant, like someone like Padre or someone of that stature.
Who read a lot of books, by the way.
Yeah, and then it was finished under the Caliphate of Uthman, the third caliph, who also was one of the Mandalis. And they had a very style of archiving that Sonia and Charlie here? Here he is, yeah. You might consider this because it would save a lot of money. What they did was they collected all the versions of the Quran and edited them and compiled and came up with what they thought was most authentic. And after writing that out, they destroyed all their sources. So the archiving costs are approaching zero. And because their idea was they didn't want people fighting about it for the next 2,000 years, and it worked. Okay, so that was their style of archiving. But it seems like they really did try to do a very good job of it. And it has generally been accepted. I mean, there are all sorts of things we could also say about that. The Buddhist sutras, after the Buddha died, there was a conference among Buddhists with the Anand was there, and Sariputta, and all these other leading disciples. And they began a memorial tradition where they would, Anand had the fabulous memory. He was like Erich. And he recited it, and they learned how to recite and transmit that way. And we may be very cynical about it, but they had much better memories back then than we have now. And there was a tradition of that in India with the Vedas. So there are reasons to believe that a lot of the sutras are pretty good. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is we're in that period now. We're, 54 years out? And what I have noticed with these previous traditions is that whatever got established in that first period tends to be accepted afterwards. People have reverence for the early, I look at myself and I'm deserving of reverence from exactly nobody, not even from myself, but it tends to happen. So the likelihood is that what gets established now may be there permanently. So it really does matter that we do a good job of it now. That's what I feel. And also, I think it really matters that the greater Baba world, and most, of course, as I say, most Baba lovers are not going to make this their specialization, have other things to do with their life. But I do think the greater Baba world should have a voice in this. Like if a new edition comes out, creation and its causes, okay, this is presented as Baba's words. Okay, I'll go into the reasons for that in a minute. But Baba lovers have every right to say, but why should I believe these are Baba's words? What is your evidence? Now, I really hope that these conversations will be reasonable and people will be amenable to reasonable discussion and persuasion and won't just shout at each other.
One more thing, as you said, life has changed. We're living in a big technical era, and social media is a very big means of communication by all means. So I'm witnessing on social media, it's cultural too. Our Indian, particularly friends and Baba lovers, which I like them very much, they don't believe in citation. They do not believe in copyright and so forth. So you see a code which is so wonderful, it touches your heart, and you ask them, so where is this coming from? Is Baba's words okay? So what's the source and page number and so forth? They don't know it. It just gets viral, one sent to another, one sent. How do you go about this?
Well,
there is a lot of public.
The immediate answer is sessions just like this one.
Yeah.
Where you have people who discuss it. And I hope that many people, would agree that coming up with reliable editions is an enterprise worth doing. And that those editions should be, and they can be criticized too, and that those editions should be used. So I think the best way is to think sessions just like this one. This is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Because I think right now I think we're at a critical phase. And if the moment is lost, it may be too late. We may have all sorts of garbage. Yeah, Margaret?
Based on our conversations, I think we're talking about two levels. One is like for people like me or Mahu who put words out to get it from whatever source we know. Right. But if the source itself, there's also...
That's right.
You have to go, like when you talk about Lord Meher, which we all rely on.
Right, I do too.
And that we need scholars to go back and footnote all those and
Right.
source all that so that we who quote it know that it's.
I totally agree. Like
that's
if
what
you're
you said.
doing a newsletter, you have to use whatever sources you know about it. That's what they're. But now we are at a stage where I do think actually it's the trust. Let me go into why the Avatar Meherabad Trust, Baba, I feel, really did give the prerogative to the trust on this. Like some people might say, the words of the Avatar belong to all humanity. The idea of copyright is completely wrong-headed with respect to his words, right? It's a reasonable thing you might say. But the answer is that Baba himself thought otherwise. Because in this very document, his last will, did you know he had a last will and testament? Yeah. The main topic dealt with is copyright. And the thing is, it does make sense because the real study and production of critical editions is something that very few people are going to do. It's murder. I mean, this Creationist Causes, I started in 1997, for God's sake. It got published last year. And Bao was involved, and Meherabode and Josawala also. And it takes years and years and years and years and years. And if you don't, you have to do it, and then you find out why. And they're just, I look at a lot of it's published, and I realize it's done with good intention and all of that, but it's just not up to the level of what we need now. And there aren't many people who are going to do it because it takes it's sort of like, I want to build time LA had some skyscrapers. I want to build a 100-floor skyscraper in LA. Well, can just anybody do that? I mean, the thing is going to fall down. You don't even need an earthquake. You just have a little 5.1 earthquake in Miramount, and here in LA, the damn thing will fall down. You have to know something about engineering, and that is true of this kind of work also. So Baba actually did assign his copyrights, and I just want to show you. So this is the document, his last will and testament.
Can you read it or give a gist of it?
I'll read bits of it. A lot of it is not really relevant to this, but you can see. This is the last will and testament of me, Merwan Shariar Arani, otherwise known as Meher Baba, aged around 73 years, at present residing at number 24 Group Prasad Bun Garden, Pune Road, Pune. Okay, that's where he was at the time. He talks about having executed the deed to the Avatar Meher Baba Trust. And here we start to get to the relevant passages. Let's see. Accepting, can you read that, or is that too small?
Yeah.
Maybe I can expand this and it'll be a little bigger. Accepting such copyrights as may have been specifically transferred by me, this is Baba, right? Me is Baba, during my physical lifetime, as has already been done by me with respect to my copyrights for my works. 1, God speaks. 2, listen humanity. 3, life at its best. And 4, beams from the spiritual panorama from Meher Baba, which copyrights have been permanently gifted by me to the Sufism Reoriented Incorporation, California, USA. So those were originally given to Sufism. I own all, now this is the critical phrase, I own copyrights in all my literary works, direct and indirect, published and unpublished, including my sayings, poems, messages, articles, discourses, books, charts, maps, etc., as well as copyrights already gifted to me and those that may be gifted to me in future by other writers who love me, and hereinafter collectively called the copyrights. So notice that after listing these titles, he has a list not of titles, but of literary genres.
That's right.
And he obviously intends to include everything that you could imagine, charts and maps, for God's sakes. And also, this was the trust, Avatar Meherabode Trust formulated policies on editing, and this was really critical to it. Baba said, all my literary works, direct and indirect, published and unpublished. So unpublished literary works fall into the category of what Baba's called my literary works. So that is the real foundation why something like Infinite Intelligence has been published with Meher Baba as the author. Because we considered it my literary works would uncover that. Now, unpublished and direct and indirect. Okay, this is a legal document, and we have to presume that these are terms that are intelligible, that we can understand. It's not in Baba's universal language that no one will ever understand, because it's a legal document, right? So one obvious meaning of direct and indirect, a direct message would be something that Baba dictated to somebody and right then and there checked and had sent out and published, say. An indirect would fall like something, a discourse that Baba gave for a bunch of Mir Ashram boys or Mandali, and that Chanji noted down in his diary. And maybe Baba checked it and maybe Baba didn't, we don't know. We consider that indirect, and that seems to me to be reasonable. Right?
That's right.
Thus, Tiffin Lectures was published with, this is the very reason for it. I'm giving you the very reason for the trust policy, is that Tiffin Lectures was published as Meher Baba as the author. It was unpublished and indirect. Infinite Intelligence likewise, and Creation and Causes likewise.
But in Infinite Intelligence book, you know, how thick it is and so forth, there are many writings, because if you compare it with the original manuscript, which is right now on our Trust website, he has made all available, there are editorial comments.
Okay, I'll be getting to all of that.
So how do we know?
So I'm just establishing the foundations for publishing it at all as works of Meher Baba's. I don't know, does anybody want to contest that much?
No.
But I mean, it's reasonable.
It's reasonable.
Somebody could say Infinite Intelligence, or let's say Tiffin Lectures, is not by Meher Baba, right? Okay, I haven't gone over the evidence yet. It's indisputable, really, that these are Chanji's notes of talks Baba gave, but you could say it's not by Meher Baba. Well, this is the grounds for saying otherwise, and I think it is reasonable. Now,
yes, it falls under indirect then, to answer my question.
okay, I'll be getting to a lot of this in a minute. Okay, everybody following this? The whole logic of this? But the trust has decided, in fact, let me show you, I'll show you, thus, in some of these, is this the one? Yeah, so in these books, like, we have statements from the chairman on this very topic. This is from Tiffin Lectures. This is written by Sridhar Kelkar, who was the chairman at the time this was published. The Avatar Meherabad Charitable PPC Trust is pleased to bring before the public this new collection of the early discourses of Avatar Meherabad, based on the diary notes and subsequent write-ups and drafts of Framrose Dada Chanji, that would be Chanji, Meher Baba's intimate disciple and personal secretary. Tiffin Lectures presents an edited text of the lectures that Meher Baba gave in 1926 to 27 as part of the education and spiritual training of his men Mandali during this foundational period of his avatar mission. And if you read this whole statement, so we put this right at the beginning, it actually explains a lot more about what the policy is and what the editing has been done and all things like that, so that all of this would be right up front. Now, because of the wording of Baba's last will and testament, the trust editorial policy has two categories of Baba's words. Okay, so this is an important thing. One would be direct and published, and the other would be indirect and unpublished. So as an example of direct, we have God Speaks, right? I mean, there Baba directly dictated it to Arij. It was read back to Baba. Baba had Sufism published it. Baba reviewed it all. So we regard that as a direct thing. And an example of indirect would be, say, the Tiffin Lectures, which, I mean, if you read the Tiffin Lectures is what's called a critical edition, and it goes over all kinds of evidence about the sources. And there's much, much more on the Trust website. So I think the case is absolutely overwhelming that the Chanji was writing down notes of talks Baba gave and then wrote them up. And we were working with his drafts. So that's indirect. So in the case of Baba's direct words, the trust policy is this. They get left alone. Now, little changes will be made, such as this. In the, there's a revised 6th edition of the Discourses. I don't know if you know about this. Came out in 2007.
Yeah.
Because there were complaints, there were criticisms of the 7th edition. Reasonable point. So we said, okay, we'll republish the 6th edition. And there were editorial changes like this. In the original, it's spelled impossible. IMPOSSSIBLE. So
That's even
do we
more
have
impossible.
do we have to go on spelling that way for the next 700 years? Or here's another example. There's a table of the enumeration of types of meditations. And a reference on page, let's say, 142. Well, in the reflowed edition, that's on page 127. So do we have to go on saying 142 for the next 700 years when it's not on that page anymore? I mean, these are obvious. So things like that. Or else the most extreme would be if there's a bad subject-verb agreement, a plural noun and singular plural subject and singular verb, something like that. So those things, those corrections were made, and I'll show you, we even did this. There's this thing called the Register of Editorial Alterations. It's right here. And so in this, it has been listed all the changes that were made, like change to becomes, changed from become, where defined in revised 6th edition, volume 1, page 153, line 28, like that. So so these are trivial changes, right? And part of the reason for doing this was that if people say, well, what have you done to the 6th edition? And, I say, well, we've done this. And they say, well, why should I believe you? Well, the answer is, well, here's a list. And if you can find other changes, say it, like that. So this seemed, the philosophy of this was that these books were published under Baba's own supervision. He got them edited himself. He reviewed them. And now we leave them alone. And there is a real argument to be made for this. And it's kind of an obvious one. I can go on at great length about this. But if people can start rewriting Baba's words, there's going to be no end to that. Yeah, Rosie?
What did the 7th edition have that you went back to printing the 6th edition?
A lot of arbitrary changes.
I mean, like these?
No, they were major changes, yeah.
Involving gender and different things like that.
But that's not a major change.
Well-
What major changes?
Well, they did nirvana. The word nirvana was used by Baba in the 6th edition to mean God realization. But in God Speaks, Baba clarifies nirvana is not God realization, it's the final fana. And that's fana, and fana fila is God realization, it follows. So in the 7th edition, they changed it that way. Also, Sahaj Samadhi and Nirvikalp Samadhi, they changed the basic definitions of those words to comport with God speaks. So the last discourse in the 7th edition, what is the title? The Journey to Sahaj Samadhi. Here, I have it here. Yeah, it's the...
This Stevens did the reprinting of 6th edition work.
In the Ascent to Sahaj Samadhi, that's the 6th edition, whereas in the 7th edition, it's the Ascent to a Nirvikalp Samadhi. So that's right in the title. So those are significant. But the logic was they were bringing it into line with God Speaks. And now, you see, this was done back, it was published in 1987, right? This is before this policy went into effect. Actually, this very question was what precipitated this policy. There were people who were very critical of the 7th edition, and they were saying, by what right do you revise the words of the avatar after he has dropped his body? And it's a reasonable question, it really is. Part of an answer that is that they had a distinguished editorial team. It was, Flag Chris, he's my generation, but then Erich Jiswala and Balna too. So I was not going to be the one to say that Erich couldn't do this,
Yeah.
And also Peter Nordine, has a memory. My usual rule is I have to have 2 people before I can accept something like this, but he's the only one. But he said he went into Mani's office once when this was going on, and she said, well, why are we doing this? Because she was chairman when Erich, Balna 2, and Flag were working on this. Why are we doing this? We wouldn't ordinarily do anything like this. Well, when the 6th edition was published, this would have been in the 67, Baba gave it to me and said, look it over and tell me what you think. And she did. And she said, well, it's a very good job, Baba, but Don Stevens, because of his great deference for Dr. Deshmukh, he was the primary original editor, didn't go as far as he should have. He should have done more. And Baba said, yes, don't say anything now, but after Deshmukh dies, you can do a new edition. So if that is true, that's a warning. And it's very plausible. I don't think Erich would have gotten involved in something like that on his own. Anyway, so the trust policy was, we're making an exception of this one case. But that's the last exception. After this, there aren't going to be any more significant revisions of Meherabad's words. Yeah, Len, do you want to say something?
So what does it fall under the second or the last portion of the will?
What's that?
What does it fall under the last portion of the will? Put back the will?
Yeah, I won't take the time now, but it's not relevant to this. It's like the pumpkin house, how it should be bestowed, and things like that. Not really relevant.
Gifted to me by somebody who loves me.
Oh yeah, no. Baba did say that he would accept copyrights donated to the trust by his lovers. That option is there.
So
Yeah, Rosie.
I'm asking what falls there.
Huh?
What falls under that?
I don't think we have much of anything yet. It hasn't really come up yet. I think Margaret Krask donated to the trust a book that she wrote about dance, a highly technical work on that only advanced dance students following, what is something, Chetty approach?
It's a classical ballet.
Yeah, it's like people who study that would be interested in it, but I think she gave it to the trust. That might be the only one so far. Yeah.
Just one point, just off to the side a little bit, but with the mention of Dr. Deschmok, I find it so fascinating that the original writing of the discourses was to some degree done by Dr. Deschmok, inspired based on points that Baba gave, rather than being literally word for word. But Baba accepted that as his words because he was essentially speaking through Dr. Deschmok.
Right, so I'm going to be getting to that very point.
Yeah.
That is most essential. Actually, I mean, you're all sitting down, so, here's the shocker. Meher Baba's words, he actually was silent. And this is true even of his published words.
Yeah.
As you're saying, and it's true of just about, in God's...
But it's also true of the Gita.
Right.
The Gita was not literally Krishna's words.
I mean, Krishna probably lived 2,000-3,000 years before that.
Yeah.
And they weren't speaking Sanskrit back then. I think this is part of Baba's work with humanity, is that even in things that we have as his published words, as you're saying, it's quite true. If you want to say, did Baba literally say this? Well, no. Baba didn't say a damn thing. He was silent. And when he communicated, he would spell, or else he would give gestures. And did Baba say the and of every little thing? No. And we don't have hardly any descriptions of this. Yeah, Sandra's putting in something that's relevant to this. Gave hardly any descriptions of how this happened. But it would seem that when Baba was dictating, he would dictate enough where the Mandali who was reading out his gestures understood his thought.
Yeah, that shows
and that would
in
express
that film.
it. Yeah. And in the film, you can see that. So, I mean, if you want to say, are these absolutely literally Baba's words? Well, no. The Mandali, it would be the words of the Mandali concerned, who was rendering what Baba wanted to convey. And of course, if Baba would spelled out a word, he would use that word, but would fill out the sentence, or maybe clarify it or expand on it. Or the point was to communicate what Baba was saying to the audience concerned. And then if it was read back to Baba, what I have observed is Baba would correct essential points that he cared about. Yeah. And a lot of things he let go. And it seems to me that when working with editors like Don and Ivy or Francis Brabazon for The Everything and the Nothing, or Deschmok and others for Discourses, Baba gave the editors the latitude to write it up well, right? Maybe less with God Speaks. That was pretty close, but Baba did not tamper with the stylistic character. Like you see a lot of Deschmok style in the Discourses, and Baba let that go. But if something mattered, he would correct it. That's what it looks like.
And listen, humanity.
And listen, humanity. Yeah, it's a complicated story because actually we have the original sources that he worked with, that had been written up and then Don revised and re-edited. And as I think, David, you said, it appears to me that Baba, Deschmok, there's a lot of Deschmok in the writing up of the Discourses. And Baba put his name on it in the end. That's the essential point, right? So if somebody say, well, Baba didn't write the Discourses, Deschmok did. Well, the thing is that Meherabode himself decided otherwise. He knew who Deschmok was. He knew what he had dictated. He knew who worked on it. And at the end, he put his name on it. So I think we should accept that,
Yeah.
you know. Now, there's nothing wrong with observing. This is, what is one? Meherabode commented, I'm forgetting the name of the discourse, that is totally a deshmukhism, you know. There's a lot of that. And you can observe that and take an interest in how the discourse found its final form. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think we should honor Baba's decision saying, I am the author.
Yeah.
This is my words. And thus, Baba was accepting the instrumentality of Deshmukh.
Yeah.
This was his lover. This was his disciple.
Yeah.
May I say the word? This was his slave, his fortunate slave,
Yeah.
just as Eretz was, with God Speaks. With all their strengths and limitations, they were Baba's, and he used them for this work. So we can observe that God Speaks has a lot of Eretz in it. Yeah, a lot of his prose style and stuff like that.
Instead of
Baba accepted it. He put his name on it. Finished.
As if he wrote through the pen of
He
Eric.
wrote that. Yeah, actually, you know, in the 9th chapter of God Speaks, some of you may be aware that actually the author of record is Erich. It says by Erich Jeswala. It's right in the book. And the joke is it's actually by Dr. Abdul Ghani. Took it from Ghani's draft. But Gary Kleiner was talking with Erich about this, and Erich had forgotten the point that he was the author of this. And so Gary was saying, well, you know, you're the author of the 10th state of God. And Erich said, what are you talking about? So Gary went and brought the book and said, by Erich Jeswala, which he had forgotten. So Erich said, mine was the hand that wrote, you know. So, okay, how about this? In God's Hand was written by Meherabode, right? So do we want to say, this was not written by Meherabode, this was written by Meherabade's hand? Would you want to split that hair? So these disciples are like that. I think that's fundamentally how we should understand it. So there can be mistakes, and there was one in the Everything and the Nothing, which was mostly Francis Brabazon with Erich's help. And in the original, they talk about light years as a term for a vast extension of time. Light years and light years. It's not. It's a measure of distance. So it's an incorrect use of the word. So in the future, you know, cynics will say, Meherabode says he knows everything, but he didn't know what light years meant. He's a dummy. He's not all-knowing. Or even worse, Meherabode says that he's infinite intelligence. Why is it that he couldn't spell intelligence correctly? He would INTELEGENCE. He misspelled the word. Okay. So all of these questions are going to come up in the future, right? But fundamentally, this is Baba's direct published words we're talking about right now.
Well, you know, this Baba's direct published work, myself, I'm convinced that those books that, like you said, Baba let go of some part of it, but the core part, he supervised it. If we really watch that film, you know, The Beyond Words by Louis Van Gaal,
Yeah.
you know, what a tough job you would say Erich has, interpreting Baba's gesture. But there are times that Baba says, you know, just like, keep on coming, you know, has this gesture that corrects, another one. And then maybe the third word that Erich uses, Baba says, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that he has done the same thing with other words.
Well, this is, you know, one of the astonishing things to me is that with all the diary records we have from Baba, so few of them ever commented on this or explained this or talked about this. This is one of the only discussions of this point by Francis Brabazon, and thank God we have it. This is, he wrote this in a letter to Robert Rouse. I don't know, did any of you meet Robert Rouse? He was, died 3-4 years ago. He lived on Avatar's abode. He was one of Francis's friends, you could say. So when Francis was, you know, Francis Brabazon, right?
Yeah.
one of the Mandali from Australia. So he would write to Robert about what was going on with Baba. And he wrote this, and this is very interesting to me, certainly. He, that's Baba, has given me some 6 pages of original material. I, of course, that's how he read that, with the aid of Erich, had to work it all out into English words. Erich and I spent 3 or 4 whole sessions with Baba on this, with me writing and rewriting between sessions, it should be, until Baba was completely satisfied. I have also been employed by Baba putting other material of his into English words. This experience has shown me how almost impossible it is, even with Erich interpreting Baba's gestures, and with Erich working with one to get Baba's say down into English words. Writing down the words that Erich speaks from Baba's gestures does not get the real sense. I think this is really important and really revelatory. I'll read that again. Writing down the words that Erich speaks from Baba's gestures does not get the real sense because, first, Erich is translating from a language Baba's sign. It means Baba's sign language. Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
When you see that Van Gasteren movie, you can get a sense of that.
Yeah.
You know, that's its own language. Baba's language, translating language, Baba's sign, which is complete in itself. And second, and this is equally important, because Baba gradually develops his discourse over a series of sessions. Mm-hmm. During the first session, he only intimates his subject. So one has to try and grasp ideas clearly and then find English words to express them. I think that is the most significant statement on this that we have anywhere. Yeah. So the thing, I mean, if you want to say, well, what did Baba really say? I want to have just Baba's words and nothing else. This is the real answer. You had to be there.
Exactly.
It was an event. It was live event, you know. And it was, you know, like that when Baba would gesture things, it's so expressive and so beautiful that, and then you'd hear Erich's words, and those words coming out would be sort of points of meeting in which the whole experience would be processed, of Baba's conveying a point beyond understanding, but you would sort of get it. You know, Valna too was trying to explain this to me one time. I always use this example, but we were working on infinite intelligence at the time. And any of you who may have read it might resonate to this comment that the word infinite occurs about an infinite number of times. And it's like, at a certain point, infinite, it means nothing. Well, Baal was saying to me, when Baba would say infinite, he would give a gesture. And I don't know what the gesture was, but what Baal was conveying was you would get infinite. It would blow, it's like, my God. It's like we're finite creatures, and you would get a hit of what the infinite was. And it's like, oh my God, the infinite. So even a word like that, coming from Baba, would have that atom bomb force with it, you know? So if you want to know what Baba really said, it's actually an event that occurred then. That's the truth. Yeah.
I don't know that it was an event that only occurred then. I understand what you're saying, but like Charles Haynes says, Bob was timeless, and every moment that he was expressing himself was a timeless moment. And as you know, we've talked about with a number of people who have read these books, and you have that experience of, oh my God, it's indescribable.
Right.
But it's available to everyone who reads it if it comes through. only Baba knows if he can bring it through to your heart.
Yeah.
So it's not like a decision we make. And,
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
I mean, some of us have read these things numbers of times, and every time it's a new
Different.
experience.
Well, here's the thing. Let's suppose Baba was dictating God Speaks to Erich, and he was communicating in that way something, I won't say inconceivable and unimaginable, but that would be charged with the sense of that Erich would get, right? So that was part of that very moment of Baba's dictation of God Speaks. But Baba was also the one who had Erich write it up, who had Ivy and Dawn edit it, who had Dodd Mead publish it, and who put his name on it in the end. He was there in that too. So, we can't just dismiss the published book. But one thing that I think, my field of study was this very topic, so I'll just say a little bit quickly on this. I think a big change that Baba is bringing about is for the last 2,500 years, the word of the Avatar and the word of God has taken the form of scripture, Holy Scripture, like the Quran, the Bible, they weren't avatars, but the Analects of Confucius, the Tao Te Ching, the Vedas, holy texts. And they've been reified, they've been turned into books and things that have stable form. And I don't knock this at all. I think this is God's plan. It was part of God's work. But I think Baba is changing the program. Baba, I have it on the slideshow, I won't pull it up, but somebody asked Baba, an interviewer, do you have a scripture? And Baba said, although I give explanations, I don't attach importance to written explanations, but to putting it into practice in life, okay, like that. I think because of this, which the humanity is going to know, people will be forced out of this scriptural literalism. Mm-hmm. I think God established that. I think he created that. You have Shankaracharya, who is that way. You have Ibn Arabi. They take the words of their sources absolutely literally, and they never question that. But I think it's time for a new program. Baba said, we have to take his words literally, be serious about that, but we have to get the essence and the gist also. So I think Baba is going to force that change to be made by humanity, where we become less fixated on quibbling about words and go back, fathom the real sense of it. That doesn't mean that we discard the words as they literally appear either, because Baba said, obey me literally, right? You can't just make it into anything that you want. But at the same time, are we going to, the LA group, time you had another good fight, right? So we could have
It's well overdue.
way overdue, much too peaceful, right? So we could have one group who holds for the Meherabode journal discourses, group 1. Group 2, the 5-volume set. Group 3, Purdam's God to Man and Man to God.
Yeah.
Group 4, the 6th edition. Group 5, the 7th edition. Treasures did another, and you could even have the revised 6th edition, whether that should, and you could really, why have 2 sides? Because 6 sides. And this room, you could duke it out and go to war, right? Are we going to do that? The thing is, somebody wants to say, well, what are Baba's words? And all of these, with the 7th edition as a possible exception, but you heard what Peter Nardine said.
That would be collector's item.
Yeah, it'll be collector's item, right? And the archivist will try to intervene, saying, don't destroy these books, they cost a lot. Yeah.
Well, this is reminiscent to me. It's been observed that there was lively literal debate in India for about 1,000 years, between Buddhism and Vedanta, between different schools of Vedanta even.
Right.
The non-dualists and the dualists, all that kind of thing.
And the
they
qualified
literally had physical debates,
Sure.
for hundreds of years. So
Yeah.
why stop it now?
But here's the thing, with all these different editions, I mean, the case really anyway, this was the trust's position on discourses. As to somebody, which is the real and authoritative edition of the discourses?
Sixth revival.
Well, the trust as copyright holder said, any of the editions published during Baba's lifetime, plus the seventh as an exception, we take to be authentic. Which, we're not saying there isn't a most authoritative edition, but the trust is not going to make that decision. That's up to readers. And it seems to me that people are going to have to say, Baba approved all of these, and you have to, limit quibbling about matters of verbiage and get the soul and essence of it. Yeah. Now, this does not mean that you can just discard Baba's words and make them into meaning anything that you want. So I think part of the work of Baba's silence is precisely this. You have to take Baba's words and really delve into them and find the depth of them. Anyway, that's a very quick thing on this. But now I want to come now. What do we have? 20 minutes? Yeah. Okay. For the case of Baba's unpublished words, right? This is a completely different case. I'll read this because this is what I was just talking about. This is an interview. What is your silent message or special discourse? Elimination of ego. You desire salvation of mankind. Have you any Bible, Quran, or some such book of revelation? Baba said, though I give discourses and people take me to be a teacher, I do not give much importance to superficial book knowledge and learning because I awaken the latent divinity within. So I think part of Baba's giving words in this way, he's going to force people not to get stuck on superficial things. And now that's not to say we won't do it, but there's going to be resistance and fighting until people realize we can't repeat the scriptural literalism of the last 2,500 years. I don't knock it. I really don't. Shankaracharya was a scriptural literalist, He was a minor incarnation of the Avatar. But we have a new regime now, the regime of Meherabode. But now, this is coming to Baba's unpublished words. Maybe if I get time, I'll read a transcript of some of the original manuscript of Infinite Intelligence to illustrate the point that this material just has to get edited. It's not readable to most people. It would be to some, but very, very few. I mean, some people would say Infinite Intelligence is not readable anyway. And also, Baba, all the evidence we have is that Baba wanted transcripts of his talks edited. He asked for that to happen. And here's, this is a statement to that effect. This is from a diary called the Combined Diary. It's the most authoritative diary from 1924 to 1927. And this was 7th August 1927. And in all probability, Baba is referring to records of his discourses. Probably Infinite Intelligence is one of those. And also the Tiffin Lectures, which were almost completed by then. And a few months later, Baba gave further talks to the boys, which would fall into this category. Anyway, Baba said this, no, it is not advisable to send my notes and lectures for composition to anyone who is away from me. Okay, so he's assuming they need to be composed into proper lectures. The writer must be here in order to ensure correctness. For example, K.J. Dastur, he then became the editor of the Mayor Message in 1929, took note of certain explanations of mine in writing the other day, yet while putting the same in his own language, he made a mess of it all. Okay. And now this is the key sentence. He said, my explanations may be recomposed in forceful and stylish language, but the spirit and meaning must remain unchanged. Okay, I'm going to read that again. My explanations may be recomposed in forceful and stylish language, but the spirit and meaning must remain unchanged. And I could talk for hours on this one sentence, but people might say it's impossible. You can't reword something without changing its meaning. Okay, I don't think that's really true. If you take meaning in a very rigorous way I won't go too far into this, but I'll say the truth conditions of an utterance. The truth conditions of an utterance, what that means is, this is my linguistics class way back, is what must be true in the empirical reality for a statement to be true. What conditions must obtain in the so-called reality for a statement to be true. It is possible to establish what those are. For this statement to be true, exactly this and only this must be true in empirical reality. Okay, I'm going very quickly through a very complex topic, but if you train your mind in reading something to say, what are actually the truth conditions of this utterance? What precisely must be the case for this to be true? You can do a much better job of it than if you don't do that. But that's one thing, spirit and meaning. The other is the spirit, the connotative dimension, the feeling aspect. So Baba's giving a bunch of talk to a bunch of boys. You should not, it should be the prose expression of it should be suitable for that, for that particular kind of audience. But he said, my explanations can be recomposed in forceful and stylish language. A lot of the diary records are just not up to the standard when it comes to prose. They're just drab or confused or hyper-repetitive because they were just being written down by Chanji on the fly as best he could, like that. Anyway, and Baba said, you may not, this is where what we were just reading is taken from. And let me see, I have a version of the, Baba said something next to Francis Brabazon too. So Baba wanted Francis Brabazon to do a complete re-edit of God Speaks, actually. And we have about 15 or 20 pages in Francis's handwriting. And it does exactly what that last thing is. Francis could write very beautiful prose when he turned his mind to it. So it's much more flowing and a beautiful prose, but it's quite exactly the same in its meaning. So this Baba dictated this to Francis. In the revised edition of God Speaks, the present introduction, that's the one that appeared in the first edition, is to be A, and another introduction, B, is to be written by Francis, in which he will say that Meher Baba directed him to re-edit God Speaks without changing the facts. So even God Speaks, Baba wanted to be completely re-edited by Francis, as a matter of fact. And as I say, we have 15, 20 pages of in Francis's handwriting.
Don Stevens ever mentioned that?
No, I don't. He probably didn't know it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ward, my impression is that at some point Francis became plagued by Alzheimer's disease, and I think that's what stopped this from being completed.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
And also, I wrote an article about this. Here, I'm going to open something else to show you what I mean. I don't seem to have it here. But also, Baba wanted various other changes and revisions made. And we have Francis's notes on the topic, and they will say things like, remind Baba about this. Like, remind Baba to explain about worms, germs, and microbes. Well, it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But what do you say?
Yeah, that's the chance.
Ask Baba about the king of the worms. Did you know that there was a king of the worms? I'd be curious to know exactly what it is, but they never revisited it. So it's not possible to...
So that awaits the next Nagarjuna.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody like that will be able to do it. But here, let me read a passage from the transcript from the original intelligence notebooks. I'm going to go on reading most of the thing and torture you with it to give you an idea of what this is like and what the problems would be. Sorry, I have to open another thing here. Yeah, this is the infinite intelligence. It's hard. Where is it? Ure contexts. Oh, darn. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot which page it's on. Yeah, okay, I think this might be it. Here we are. Okay, so this is a literal transcript of how the intelligence notebooks read. You know, the intelligence notebooks are the source, the handwritten source for infinite intelligence. There's much, much more that can be said about that. But this is one passage to give you an idea of how it would read. One of the characteristics is it has like brackets and brackets within brackets and brackets within brackets. And sometimes a sentence will go on for half a page. And as you come out of the brackets, you have to count brackets to figure out what is the subject for this verb. And it actually works out. It's very carefully done. But no normal person would write that. It's a highly artificial style. So this is sort of an illustration. It is out of the infinite intelligence's thinking equals consciousness, movement, vibration, brace, parentheses, thinking that it, underline, does not think, knowing that it does not know, close parentheses, does not think equals does not know, equals imagination, close parentheses, close brace, right? Open there.
Oh.
That the akasha, so it is out of this, that akasha and prana have been produced. It is out of the infinite intelligence thinking that fine imagination is produced in infinite gross and subtle form, i.e., it is out of thinking that imagination, parentheses, which was in its original fine, most finite nirakar state in the infinite intelligence when it was not thinking, close parentheses, is manifested in the subtle and gross form, parentheses. This akasha and prana, which make up the subtle and gross imagination, are manifested through the thinking, the consciousness. I'm going to go on reading this so you really can get hit by a blast of it. Okay? The movement, the vibration. This thinking, being the infinite intelligence thinking, is also infinite, i.e., it is the universally existing thought power, i.e., the infinite mind of the infinite intelligence. The mind when thinking imagination, i.e., creating the universe, the false mind when thinking the imagination, i.e., realizing the universe, and the real mind when thinking itself, i.e., realizing itself. Brackets. From knowledge comes out knowing, and from knowing has come out ignorance, parentheses, universe, close parentheses. As the infinite knowledge knows, knowing, that it does not know, parentheses, ignorance equals universe, close parentheses, brace. Imagination equals darkness equals ignorance equals universe, close brace. Means that infinite knowledge acknowledges its ignorance, brace, parentheses, i.e., realizes the universe. The infinite knowledge is knowing, A, creates knowledge, i.e., universe, and it knows, parentheses, knowing, parentheses, B, its ignorance as knowledge. So do you get, I mean, this is, it's, who could read this? Now, if someone were to say, if I read this slowly and carefully, I can make sense of it. That is true. You can. But how many people are going to do that?
I think it has to be set to the right music.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to decipher this?
Well, actually, the thing is, the main job was done by Merwan, Jesawala, and me. And we would spend a whole day on half of this, you know. And it's not that it was that hard to understand, because it actually makes sense. It's very well done, actually. It's just the prose. This is no one's natural prose style. This was a highly artificial style, this is my opinion, that was created in order to render the content of what Baba dictated most exactly. And it does do that. But no ordinary people would just, I mean, okay, you could spend an hour and a half and make sense of this. Would you want to go through 250 pages of this? Only textual editors could bear it. It's sort of like boom, 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 boom. It's like driving 50 miles an hour down a road with huge potholes, you know. You might manage it for 2 minutes, but for 10 hours, you'd be dead, you know. So it's just common sense. This has to be edited. It has to be. And that's true of all of Baba's unpublished words. Baba gave the directive, my words, explanations can be recomposed in forceful and stylish language, spirit meaning. So we've done that. So this might be the most controversial side of it. So things like infinite intelligence or creation and its causes, this has been done. But now people would very well should raise the question, okay, but why should I trust the job you've done, right? You may give a good talk about this, but what if you stuck in all sorts of things? Or, you know, you say you've done the best you could, but in point of fact, you misunderstood it all, or have, you know, put in your own slants and biases. These are very fair questions, and this very well could happen, and could have happened. So there is no sin in people raising these. See, this is why I'm in front of the Baba world. It's really important. There's no crime in raising questions like this. I think people can raise them and should, if they feel so prompted. But this then is the greater editorial policy that the Trust has. I gave some examples of what could be done to Baba's words. I won't take the time. But, you know, it really would be possible for editors to do really nefarious things in the course of editing. It can be done. As an editor, I do know this. But here are the policies, 3 imperatives in the creation of critical editions of Baba's words. Okay, this is about critical editions. First, it has to be based on exhaustive study of all relevant sources, documentary and other. You can't just find a manuscript and go publish it.
I'm sorry, what is critical edition?
Okay, I'll say that in a minute. So but this is part of defining it, actually. Okay. You need to do the research to find all sources, and this can take years. This is one of the things that I'm most dissatisfied about a lot of what comes out right now. 2, editorial principles that are consistent and objective, and editorial practices attuned to the kind of editing that Baba wanted. Okay, you may say, what kind of editing did Baba want? Well, I just read some of his statements on that. And the other test would be, how did the books we have get edited? We have discourses, we have God Speaks, that's evidence. So study how Baba wanted this to be done. And third, transparency in these matters through instruments of disclosure within the edition itself. And yeah, Cassandra's been putting up, like this is from the Trust website, endnotes for the lecture of 29, okay, this is one of the Tiffin Lectures, right? And these are the endnotes. These are the sort of things that can put you right off into the beyond state for most people. But this these endnotes, there's 60, 70, 80 pages of them. And they try to mark every instance that I could find where there seemed to be an issue in the editing of one sort or another. And if you want to know what the issue is, well, here they are. And like here, though you see that, right, the sort of mark, yeah, click on that if you could. This is on the Trust website. We put the endnotes. And if you click on it, you get the source document.
Oh.
So all of those endnotes have links. So if you want to say, well, is this a good rendering of Baba's words? Well, the source is online. We haven't shown that, but it's right in the same section of the Trust website. And all the endnotes are online, and all of the citations are links like that. Yeah, here's another one. Maybe in the future we could do something to highlight the passage in question to make it easier. It's just a lot of work to do this. Could you show that other one, that table 1 we had earlier?
For Tiffin Lectures.
For Tiffin Lectures, Appendix 1, I think it was. We had it up a few minutes ago. So this is part of the whole thing of transparency. I mean, our time is up, but there are like 250 pages in the back of the book that go over the sources, explaining what the sources were, what their credibility is, how the typed source is based on different layers in Chanji's diary, where Chanji's diary is to be found. Also, another thing that's very relevant is the glossary. And the reason the glossary matters is that those non-English words are almost certainly words that Baba used. That's why they got put in there, almost for sure. So if you want to say, what are Baba's words? Well, those are certainly some of them, right? So there is a huge amount of material for anyone who is interested, right? And most people won't be, but some will. And in the course of time, there will be people who dive into the depths of this. Yeah, the Appendix 1, wherever that is. I don't think it's going to be there. It might be at a higher level.
I keep forgetting where these things are.
I know it's hard. It won't be under endnotes. It will be, yeah, I have to go down to Tiffin Lectures.
See, it moves. It moves. We need to redo this website.
Yeah, I know. Go to Trust Publications. Go down to Tiffin Lectures, yeah. And go to manuscripts. Or just click on Tiffin Lectures, see what happens. Might come up. Here, I do want to show you guys this, and this maybe could be the last thing. Okay, scroll down.
This is yours.
Yeah. Introduction, table of contents, first manuscript. Is there something, Appendix 1 should be there somewhere. No, that won't be it. You had it up.
I did have it a little while ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, trust me, it's there.
Okay. Anyway, I'll describe what it is. This appendix gives all the pages of the Tiffin Lectures on the right-hand column, and on previous columns you can find the sources for every one of those pages. The manuscript. There. Yeah, that's it. If you can expand that, yeah. So see on the right-hand side are the page numbers from the book. That's what this is. And these are the different manuscripts, and these are the pages that are the source for that page in the final book. You have no idea how much work it is. Years and years and years
Are each
of
of
work.
those linked to pictures?
We would like to do that, but we haven't been able to get it done yet. Yeah, it'd be nice if you could just click on it.
Yeah.
So like for this page, whatever it is, these are all the sources. Here, go to the next page if you could. It gets to see how tangled it becomes. Yeah, like look at some of these. There are all these different sources. So this is part of transparency. That is to say, somebody wants to say, Are these Baba's words? Well, this is actually the answer. These are the sources that there were, and this is how it was edited. Check it out yourself, you know? And there will be people who do this.
There will be.
There will be in the course of time. Okay, I could talk for hours and hours and hours on this, but it's time for all this hot air going out for hot food to start going in. So, okay, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.